All right, once again, this is Cageside Jay with Cageside Mike on the drive in. It is about 5:17 a.m. These seem to be getting earlier and earlier. Plenty to talk about. We're heading into UFC Utica this weekend, Fight Night 131. Jimmy Rivera, Marlon Moraes, but we're not going to worry about that right now. This is probably going to come out a couple of days from now, some time to edit. And what we are going to talk about first is the announcement that Michael Bisping is officially retired from MMA. The former middleweight champion, Ultimate Fighter winner, announced his retirement on his podcast, Believe You Me, earlier this week. He had been looking for a retirement fight for a while. There was talk about that third Rockhold fight, although Rockhold was talking about going up to light heavyweight. There had been talk about a Belfort fight at one point a while back, although, he obviously just lost what is supposed to be his retirement fight to Lyoto Machida, and there had been talk about a Lyoto Machida fight. Obviously, none of that's happening now. I guess the question before us is, would you like to have seen him go at it one more time, because he did finish on those back-to-back losses to GSP and Kelvin Gastelum, and is Michael Bisping a lock for the Hall of Fame?
I would say yes to all of it. We almost said it before we started recording. It would be nice to have seen him be able to hang him up at the end of a fight in the ring. But on the other hand, you know what? Michael Bisping, I think he's kind of earned going out on whatever terms he wants. One of the hardest working guys in the UFC. Good for him. I know he's having some issues with his eye and stuff too. So would I like to see him go again and maybe on a win? Of course. Say what you will about Michael Bisping, he's always showed up for the company. And I think Hall of Fame, the numbers he's put up, he's probably one of the more underestimated fighters that have been in the UFC. And I think a lot of that has to do, it's almost maybe it's the Michael Bisping effect, not the Conor McGregor effect, is people discredit him because of the way he talked, I think. I don't know. Is he a great fighter?
Well, I think the argument is, if you stick around at a top level for that long, you're a great fighter. When we start debating, any kind of debate on who's good, who's great, if you're in the top 10 in the UFC, you are a great fighter, because you are essentially in the top 10 to the top 20 of the sport when you count the other promotions. We're not going to go with this make-believe narrative that only the best are in the UFC. There are great fighters outside of it, but the bulk of great fighters, especially in North America, Brazil and elsewhere, are in the UFC. So yes, he is a great fighter.
Or have been in the UFC.
Or have been in the UFC at some point.
And going into that, he's probably been a top 10 fighter in his weight class for a majority of his career.
And started at light heavyweight, won the Ultimate Fighter at light heavyweight, eventually dropped down to middleweight. And if I recall, that was coming off a win with the realization that he would be more competitive at 185 pounds. He went through that string of title eliminators where it seemed like he was the also-ran, always the bridesmaid, never the bride kind of guy who was going to go his entire UFC career with no title. And then at the 11th hour, in terms of his career, got the short notice shot against Luke Rockhold, UFC 199, I believe it was. Makes the most of it. The quick knockout of Rockhold. And, you can criticize him for the title defenses of waiting, a little too long for them, of fighting Dan Henderson. But at the same time, at that point in Michael Bisping's career, has he arguably earned to pick his opponent? Maybe. He knew he was on his way.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I was going to say, I think, looking back now, do we look at that and say maybe he was being a little more selective because he knew, I don't have much time left,
How different does his career go if he doesn't get the win against Anderson Silva in that fight, where Anderson Silva nearly finishes him and starts celebrating the win after that first round, and then the ref's like, no, hey, time expired. The round's over. He's not knocked out. To many, they thought he was. Obviously, Anderson Silva thought he was. But, man, that happens. If that goes the other way, he never gets a shot against Rockhold, and Michael Bisping is never champion, and maybe we're having a different debate right now. So circumstances play a lot into this. But something that you mentioned, the other thing that could have changed a lot, you mentioned it the other day when he was on the Fox broadcast, his eye, I mean, it looks dead.
It looks dead. And you know what? I knew he's had eye issues since the injury. He's had over five surgeries, I think, at this point. He has a lot of records. He might have the record for getting hit in the eye. Poked in the eye the most at this point. I'm not sure. But that eye is looking real nasty. And it wouldn't surprise me if he was kind of just getting by on, oh yeah, I can see.
Well, I mean, he said he needs eye surgery that would be career-ending, and I wonder how much of a factor that played in. I'm sure family played a factor. He was finishing his last two fights, and albeit the GSP loss was a submission, but he got rocked before that.
And Bisping was doing okay up until he was doing okay.
Yeah, and I mean, throughout his career, he's not a guy who's gone on a lot of crazy winning streaks. He had one of his better runs towards the end. But he was always a guy who would win a couple and then lose one, win a couple and then lose one. But he was there, he was consistent, he was active. He didn't lose a lot of time due to injury. So overall, yeah, Hall of Fame, he's a shoo-in. There's no question.
Well, and I think, too, from what you said there, we've talked about it before. Do we put too much into fighters being undefeated or winning? There was a long time running thing where if you lost through the UFC, you're gone, right? And I think if you're a fighter, maybe you look at Michael Bisping's career. He's done things pretty right. He's not undefeated. I think he's lost 9 fights total in his career.
Somewhere in that neighborhood.
And he's had a good career. He's had longevity. For the most part, he's been healthy outside of the eye. For the most part. He has had a long career, and he's always been one of those guys, even if he has maybe been a little unrecognized for a while, maybe we'll appreciate him a little more now he's gone. If I'm a fighter coming up, there's guys I'm looking at. Bisping's not exactly the worst, and he's also got himself set up to maybe stick around fighting now that he's done with commentary and some other things. He's a pretty charismatic guy.
And he's got the acting gig as well. I mean, he did that Triple X movie. He's done the Westworld guest appearance. He's surprisingly, it looks like because I think a lot of the grief that Michael Bisping got throughout his career has been his attitude, and that's a valid criticism. There are times in his career where Michael Bisping did things like the Rivera fight, the spitting incident to Rivera's corner, whether I was spitting or he was intentionally spitting in the direction of his corner, trying to spit on him or not. I always think of it as the old hockey code of conduct. Man, spitting is a huge no. You spit at someone in hockey, you're going to get your lights punched out.
It's a little disrespectful.
It's disrespectful, and respect's a big part of both sports. So when you get to this type of incident, when you get to kind of his attitude on The Ultimate Fighter against Jason Miller, who came off as kind of the good guy, which is hilarious considering what a downward spiral that Miller went on in the years to come. Bisping rightfully took a lot of criticism for his attitude, but don't let it take away from what he did in the cage. And I don't know if he's matured. I think he probably has a little.
I feel like he has.
I think some of it, to be honest, it's just Bisping. That's who he is. But he was. I mean, before Conor McGregor, there was Michael Bisping. He didn't have the results in the cage to the same level until, much later in his career with the title. But he had that trash talk. It turned some people off. And I think that's the only reason that anyone would say, oh, I don't want to see him in the Hall of Fame, because he does deserve to be there.
Well, and going back, I was never a huge fan of Michael Bisping, right? You know that. But you gotta respect the guy, for sure. And he always shows up to fight, realistically, He's never... I don't remember many or any Bisping fights where I was like, man, that sucked. Or that was not a good fight, or... he's one of those guys where if he's on there, whether you like him or not, you're going to want to watch him fight.
Now,
I think that says a lot.
Oh, for sure. Now, the other thing that I about, do I want to see him go again? And I know you said you would.
I would, but I wouldn't, because I know with the eye, is he going to take more damage? It's unnecessary. Does he even really need another fight outside of just, hey, do one more and then just to finish on that so you can end in the cage? For his health and everything. And then who's he going to fight? And it's not going to mean anything. It's a little selfish from the fan perspective, because you always want to see the guys be able to talk to the fans in the moment, be like, hey, you know what, this is it. But who knows? Maybe after his last fight, he looked at everything. He's like, you know what? It's not worth it for me to keep going this way.
It might have been that. I really do suspect that friends and family played a role. That he did think about the health aspect of it. You can't speak for the guy. You can only speculate.
Yeah.
He said his piece. He'll probably say more. I mean, Michael Bisping's a pretty open guy. He's active on social media. He's got his podcast. He's on the Fox broadcast. So you're going to find out more and more about his thought process as time goes on. But, when I look at it, what's left? Well, there's no meaningful fight. And if there's no meaningful fight, then why fight?
That's it. He's...
Other than for the love of it.
Well, yeah, and there's that. But he doesn't need to. And like I said, it's... Would I like to see him end in the cage? Yeah, absolutely, right? Like, that's... he needs to be standing in the cage with Joe and saying, you know what, it's been a good run, and do that whole thing. That's a whole other discussion, for retirements. Like, should guys be retiring in the moment of the ring with, because we've had a couple that were kind of like guys kind of half retiring in the ring. And,
well, that's, that is almost...
It should be its own conversation, maybe.
Yeah, and this is something, I don't want to say it's unique to fighting. You see it in pro wrestling as well. And, I don't like to make too many pro wrestling comparisons because, a certain portion of the fan base can't stand that the two are so closely associated. But you do see it with guys leaving and coming back, leaving and coming back. Well, how many times has Ric Flair retired? How many times has Terry Funk retired? And those are just, I'm not even a huge wrestling guy, and I can think of those. You don't see it as often in other sports. Yes, Michael Jordan came back. Very few athletes who retire in other sports do. Wayne Gretzky never came back. Right? He retired, and that was it. And that's a guy who arguably could have. The Rangers went out like a year later, and I can't remember who it was they got. I think they had that fly line, actually, with Theo Fleury. You look at it and you go, oh, well, Gretz could have gone another couple of years. And I think he even said at the time, if they had done this while I was on the team, I probably would have stuck around another year or two and buried everyone in the record books that much further, to be honest. But you do see it in fighting. You see it in boxing. Guys like George Foreman keep going and coming back and doing one more fight. And, I think it has a lot to do with the mentality of fighters, the love of the sport, the fact that, unlike some sports, arguably, again, especially the heavier weight classes, we've talked about this before, you can go a little longer because power goes last.
Yep.
There's a lot of reasons for it. So I don't know if guys should be retiring in the cage or not because they might change their mind. I'm not sure if it matters. At the end of the day, maybe it's a tease to fans, but who cares? It's about the fighter at that point and what they're going through. It's their moment. So,
I feel too now that we've talked about it a bit. Michael Bisping is a big enough fighter. He probably means enough to the UFC. They'll probably do a little something for him, I think.
Oh, I would hope so.
Well, yeah, I would hope so. I'd like to see something. He's had a long career. He's done a lot for the company. He showed up. He's one of the only. He's like the only fighter to fight in like a month, in a month span. It's one of his stats. The headliner card. Most of the cards he's been on, he's either headlined or co-main event. I think 22 of his fights in the UFC have been that. So he's definitely been one of their guys. I'm sure they've taken care of him, and I'm sure they'd want to do something to kind of be like a thank you.
And this brings up a good point because Dan Henderson retired, and they really there was a special on Fight Pass or whatever, but I don't recall them doing like a big thing at an event.
Legend.
Yeah.
Dan Henderson is a legend, right? Like, there's no getting around that one, and I think he would get that. But I also wonder too, Dan Henderson. Would he want that? Does he want that?
I don't know.
Does he care? Dan Henderson strikes me as a guy who's like, yeah, I'm good.
Although, and this is the point where I say, well, some of this might be for the fans. They would like to say goodbye. I would like to see some of these bigger name fighters when they retire. And keeping in mind that it's such a young sport that we haven't had a lot of this so far.
No.
But bring them out at an event. Have them walk down the cage. Have them give a farewell speech. You see some players in pro sports do it at the start of the following season after they retire, and they get their jersey retired, right? Well, there's no jersey in MMA. And there is the Hall of Fame for the UFC. But that might come years later. But what about after you retire? If it's been a year and it looks like a guy is, serious about retirement, maybe you do something. Maybe you raise his photo to the... you can't do an arena because you don't have a home arena. But maybe you do it at the Performance Institute in Vegas.
That would be cool. You know what? The thing you mentioned, the sport is young in the grand scheme of things, right? Realistically, we're starting to see. This is the beginning of seeing guys retiring who really could keep going, right? For a long time, a lot of fighters would stick around past probably their expiration, as some people would say, right?
The Shamrocks and the Severs.
This bus is gonna hit this car. That's cool. And going into that, right? You have guys who stick around, and there's a lot of it fighting's their life, and to not have that, they don't know what to do, right? Or other reasons. So I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing fighters being in positions and maybe being more informed as to maybe a better idea of long-term health costs to fighting for putting the miles on that Bisping has. And you're seeing these guys who arguably could probably keep going if they wanted to, saying, you know what, I'm good, I'm going to hang them up, and it's been a good run. Now, that's a big change. That's a huge change, right?
It is. Now, this is an excellent segue into our next topic that I'm going to throw out here. And it goes in very well because we're talking about longevity in the sport. We're talking about guys sticking around. We're talking about retirements. Well, the other fighter who retired recently, Vitor Belfort. And we've talked about Dan Henderson as well, who's a little bit further back now. He retired after the loss to Bisping, which is a fight where he arguably could have won. Bisping was beat up in that fight. He won on points, but, he might have won the war, but he lost the battle.
He has the H-bomb whenever you have that.
But
I would, and this is not a great thing. This is probably why some fighters stay around too long. I'd watch Dan Henderson shuffle around the ring with his hand cocked, waiting to drop that bomb. I'd watch it today.
Now, and this is what I'm getting at. I spoke to Sam Alvey. Sam Alvey's fighting this weekend, this Friday, at UFC Utica, UFC Fight Night 131. By the time anybody's listening to this, it'll already have gone down. But I spoke to him late last week, and one of the topics that we covered was the idea of a seniors league for MMA. Now, Sam Alvey, and you can check out this interview, cagesidepress.com. You can check it out on our YouTube channel, the audio of it. But one of the things, he wasn't a big fan of calling it a seniors league because realistically these guys aren't seniors per se, but they are veterans. He's a big fan of what Belfort is doing. He pointed out that Belfort almost has this with some of their older guys, but he's a big fan of letting the older guys go. And he said, don't have them go through USADA. Juice them to the gills, let them go. He's saying, I would love to see TR Vitor go again. He's like, I can't wait for that. He's like, I would love to see the older guys compete, and it makes all the sense in the world. Do we need that senior circuit? Do we need, some kind of platform for the older guys who want to go? And the reason it came up actually was Chuck Liddell coming back.
Which that fits in this conversation too.
Yeah, right? but do we need it? Do we need to do it? I think we've talked about it a little bit before, but, do we need to seriously consider, and maybe it's not part of the UFC, maybe it's not part of Bellator even, but is there an opportunity for a promotion to come along and say, we're going to do a 40-plus promotion where it's all guys 40 and over? And it's not such a crazy idea, and I know this isn't contact, but there's plenty of 40-plus jiu-jitsu tournaments.
You're right. You're not wrong. I think eventually, I think that could be a thing. But again, I think we talked about this before. I don't know. My big thing, I'd like to know the opinion of one of the more veteran guys on that, right? Because I think a lot of fighters want to, in their mind, they want to be the best. And I mean, and maybe that can translate to if there's a veterans league or a legends league, whatever you want to call it. But I think like if you're Chuck Liddell coming back, Chuck Liddell was talking about fighting John Jones,
right? And he was, and that's. I'm going to just come out and say that's ridiculous.
Well, and that leads me to, if such a league existed today, and Chuck Liddell's coming back, is Chuck Liddell saying, you know what, I'm going to go to that Veterans League and fight a bunch of guys I've already fought, probably? Or I'm Chuck Liddell from 10 years ago, and he still might be a monster, really. Power's last things to go. He'll throw that overhead shot and probably knock someone out. But you know, is he doing that, or is he saying, you know what, I'm going after John Jones, I'm going after whoever has the title?
Well, he's talking about fighting Tito first, so that's a Legends fight right there. I think you're going to leave it up to the individual athletes. Some of them, if they want to compete, and if they prove they can compete with the guys at the top, the younger guys at the top,
no reason not to.
Then so be it. I mean, Dan Henderson was in there right till the end. Dan Henderson elbowed Hector Lombard in the next Tuesday. Now, Hector Lombard is no spring chicken, but he's still a powerful dude. So, yeah, obviously he was still competing. But, I mean, hey, you leave it up to the individual athlete, and if they can go, let them go. If they want to do the Legends League, and by the way, credit this to Vitor Belfort, who I think was the first one who really brought this up about a year and a half ago, pushing for this idea. Again, talking to Sam Alvey, he suggested that, hey, I've got hopefully 15 years left in the sport, and that's going to take him to his mid-40s, but, like you said, he can't imagine his life without fighting, and I get that. It's hard, no matter what business you are in, it's hard to imagine the end sometimes.
Well, and I think, especially in sport, fighting, a lot of these guys and girls now fighting, they're starting from when they're children, right?
Yeah.
Ronda Rousey was doing judo her entire life. A lot of the MMA fighters, they get into high school wrestling and go from there. So
or much earlier. Some of them wrestling
earlier,
before.
yeah. Or jiu-jitsu guys doing it, when they're 7 years old, maybe.
I assume the Gracies are doing jiu-jitsu coming out of the womb.
I think they pull them out, they cut the umbilical cord, and they put
an armbar on the docket.
They put a little white belt on them, and you're off to the races. To all of a sudden not have that after your entire life, I can see that being difficult. I think that eventually, it may just be a matter of time, right? As we get further along, these fighters get older, you're going to have a bigger pool to go from. I think it's been proven that if you have these older fighters, people will watch them, right? People will watch Ken Shamrock fight today.
The more I think about it, if it's against someone of their own age and their own skill set, and they pass the medicals, the more I'm willing to say I will watch the crap out of that fight. If you book
Don Fry, bring Don Fry. I love Don Fry.
Maybe not. I know you do. Maybe not Don Fry. He's had some serious health issues.
Yes, he has.
But I mean, Dan Severn was even going to do one more fight a while back. I mean, if you booked Royce Gracie in a fight tomorrow, I would watch it. I will admit. If you book Shamrock, man, I don't want to see Shamrock get knocked out. He came close, so he had Kimbo in that choke, and it wasn't a great fight, but I'd probably still watch it. There is a point where, guys like that, you are concerned about the health and the long-term consequences, and that's why I say, if they pass the medical.
Well, and that's the other thing, too, is I think you'd have to give them a lot of scrutiny and make sure, you want to give these guys an outlet, but you don't want them killing themselves in this sport. And as fans, we don't want to I think as fans, we don't want to let go of some of these fighters, right? You remember, Dan Henderson. Remember watching Dan Henderson in Pride, and for him to hang him, or Randy Couture. For me, Randy Couture was a big one when he was down. I was like, man, he was one of my favorite fighters.
After the Lyoto Machida fight in Toronto, no less, Crane kicked his tooth out, and then we saw shades of that against Vitor Belfort when he retired Vitor Belfort. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Randy Couture is another one.
There's ones that are hard to let go, and there's other ones, and it all depends on the fighter. Some fighters, going back to Chuck, I was okay when he said he was done. Because you don't want to see, he was taking some bad knockouts. You don't want to see the guy hurting his quality of life in the future because of fighting. Potentially. Right? And it's a case-by-case thing, and that may make it extremely difficult. And Chuck Liddell's not one of those guys. I'm not a huge Chuck Liddell fan. I'm a fan of Chuck Liddell. That guy, I would always watch him fight because I know if he's stepping in that cage or in those ropes when he went to Pride, you're going to see a hell of a fight one way or the other.
Now, I want to throw this out here real quick because we got to wrap it up in a few minutes. But of all the talk about this guy should retire, that guy should retire, Chuck Liddell needed to retire because he took 3 consecutive knockouts or whatever it was. How much of that is narrative? How much of that? I mean, Dana White was coming out and saying publicly, like, Chuck, you got to retire. Pack it up. Joe Rogan did the same with Brendan Schaub. But here's the thing. We all said that about Alistair Overeem. I think I actually, years ago, wrote a piece about Alistair Overeem, probably needing to retire due to the damage he was incurring. On that terrible streak that he was on where Bigfoot finished him, and who else? I think it was Big Ben Rothwell or whoever it happened to be. And then you had Andrei Arlovsky, where everyone was saying Arlovsky's done, he needs to pack it in, he's got the glass chin. And these guys have come back. Overeem went on to another title shot. At this point, do we maybe need to step back as fans, as people who aren't doing this? I mean, yeah, we cover the sport professionally. I probably watch more MMA than most other people. I speak to fighters. I get their opinion, but at some point, do we got to go, this is their choice. They probably know how they're feeling better than we do. They've got access to medical experts. Let's just let them make the call.
I think that's something to move towards. I think if you go, depending on how long you've been watching MMA, there's fighters that'll die in that cage. It's up to them.
And there's fighters that'll say that.
Right? I think there's truly a couple that they'll keep going until there's nothing left.
You mean like the Nogueiras, where you got to break their arm to get them out of the cage?
Yeah, there is that there, and I think the mentality, and I don't know if narrative. I don't know if Dana White saying that publicly to Chuck is the right thing to do. We don't know everything. I know that they're close, and maybe Dana was like, probably knew a little more than he normally would, and he was concerned about his friend. And I think that's, say what you will about Dana White, but that seemed fairly genuine to me.
Oh, and to his credit, I mean, he's come back. He's not a fan of Liddell coming back. Now, he said there's a reason I asked him to retire almost 10 years ago. He was referring to Oscar De La Hoya as Oscar De La Aram, and we all know how much Dana White likes Bob Arum. So, yeah, I mean, there is legitimate concern for his friend in this case. But, yeah, I mean...
And as fans, I think there is a lot of emotion in fighting, as there can be. And I think that some fans... And there's criticism. There's a lot of reasons. But I think once you get... You don't want to see a guy get hurt. You don't want to see a guy drastically have his life altered over a fight. And I think when you watch, Arlovsky's a good example. Arlovsky took some pretty bad knockouts in that little run there where people were like, man, he's probably done. Right? And he was able to come back and do some stuff, and that's great. But I hope that didn't affect the quality of his life. And as you were saying, they have doctors and guys around them. They do more today than they did 10 years ago. Right? And I think that's probably something for guys who've been watching the sport for as long as they have. Maybe we forget how much things have changed behind the scenes a bit, where it's not just, the guys have a fight, they go to a bar, have a couple drinks, and they unwind, and whatnot, where they have it is treated more as a sport than we're just going to have a fight.
Yeah,
you know,
you've got your medical staff on. Yeah, and you've got your pre-fight medicals, you got your post-fight medicals. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think eventually that will go away. I feel, there may still be a little bit to it because again, people like to criticize, people get emotionally involved, and they don't want to see these guys. Most people don't want to see these guys get hurt. I like to think everyone does. You don't want one of these guys having their life changed over stepping into a cage that goes on a fight team. Yeah.
Absolutely not. All right, so I think we're at the end of our drive, or close enough. There's going to be a coffee in the near future, perhaps. So where we're at, I want to thank everyone for listening. Leave some comments on the website. Leave some comments on the YouTube page. Like it if you like it. Don't if you don't.
Suggestions. Leave suggestions too.
Suggestions for topics to cover. We're down for that. We're just having fun with this. This is something that's been good. We got some good response to the Nick Diaz chat. There's hopefully going to be some updates on Nick Diaz coming up too. Was in touch with Las Vegas PD. They sent us the same mugshot you've seen around. Junkie posted it, but we'll try and get some more information on exactly what transpired there. Maybe that's something we'll talk about in the future. You'll at least see it on the site. All right, this is the drive in. This is now the drive over. Thanks for listening.